Chairman, I can confirm that the new live stream link is now operational.
Thank you. Deborah, we're ready to go when you are.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, members. Good afternoon. What we thought we would do is just a brief general introduction to what the World Heritage Site is, where the management plan comes in terms of its governance, and how we've arrived at the key issues and the strategic actions and the 2 new policies that have been proposed as part of this new management plan. So just to start, what is a World Heritage Site? Well, the site is governed by the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, otherwise known as UNESCO's, Convention on the Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage that was first promulgated in 1972. And the UK government, along with 192 other countries around the world, are signatories to that convention. And embedded in that is this concept that there are places, either by virtue of what they teach us about the way the planet has evolved, or what they can show us about how our own species has evolved and adapted on that planet, that are so important to understanding that evolution and that story, that they're regarded as being of outstanding value to the whole of humanity. So it's a short statement, but a very big idea. There are only about 30 other World Heritage Sites in the UK's nomination process. The majority of those, 28 of those, are in mainland UK, and 2 or 3 others in the overseas territories. So it's quite a small club, and it's quite difficult to get into. And one of the things that you have to do as part of that club is to have a clear management system governed by a management plan that shows how you will care for that outstanding universal value. Our universal value is based on 3 principal contributions to the evolution of humankind. Cornwall and West Devon, at the peak, the period of interest that we cover between 1700 and about 1914, were the principal producers of tin, and also most of the world's copper were coming out of this small peninsula at that time. And in order to access that material, locally, it was pioneered a really revolutionary steam and mining technologies that were then transferred around the globe. And along with that transfer of technology went a workforce, and with that workforce went its culture. So you can see on every continent on the face of the earth, all 6 major continents, in 175 places across them, there are other landscapes that look remarkably similar in some cases to ours, and also communities with whom we share not just bloodlines but also some cultural traditions. So you will find, for example, that one of the world's largest pasty festivals is actually in Mexico, and one of the world's largest festivals of Cornish culture is actually in South Australia. In Cornwall and West Devon, our World Heritage Site actually covers 10 areas where the features of the mining landscape and how it transformed during that period of our interest. 10 areas that total about 19,700 hectares. And within that, we absorb a lot of communities. There are about 57 town and parish councils that intersect with those boundaries in some way, shape or form. And that leads us as one of the UK's largest and certainly its most complex World Heritage Site. Some interesting management challenges. The World Heritage Convention requires of the UK government that it protects, conserves, presents and transmits to future generations that culture and that landscape. But in reality, although the UK government is the signatory to the convention, delivery at the local level is dependent on a whole range of other organisations, most notably local authorities, because they are both the local planning authorities, but also providers of strategies and services relating to regeneration, education, tourism, highways, etc. Our World Heritage Site largely sits with a lot of individual owners, because of the nature of it. So, for example, we take in Campbell and Redruth, and anyone who lives in a miner's cottage is in effect living in a little bit of outstanding universal value. So we have upwards of 90,000 stakeholders, if you like, that are involved in the World Heritage Site in some way, shape or form. The management plan defines the vision, mission and strategic objectives through which we will deliver the convention in relation to that asset. But also what we try and do is integrate the convention and its obligations with local authority and other community plans like neighbourhood development plans, so that we can utilise the status for the benefit of the people who live in and around the World Heritage Site and who in reality care for it on a day-to-day basis. To provide a structure for that complexity, the government's arrangements have been in place for about a year now, 10 years now, that bring together the principal management bodies in a partnership board. So that comprises at the moment Cornwall Council, West Devon Borough Council, Devon County Council, representatives from town and parish councils in both Devon and Cornwall, and also the major owning organisations like the National Trust, who are the single largest owner of any of that landscape, with about 8% of the World Heritage Site, and also our partners, the areas of outstanding natural beauty, because we overlap with the 12 Cornwall AONB areas and with the Tamar Valley as well, in at least 5 of our 10 World Heritage Site denoted areas. And all partner local authorities work together to develop that plan and then to individually and collectively implement it. So what the plan is, it's very much a strategic overview. It sets out the long-term vision for the site and priorities for the next 5 years. It explains the reasons for designation, the site and the landscape features within it, how those are protected, and it identifies for that 5-year period what the partnership and its consultees have identified as the key management issues and how it intends to address those. What it isn't is it isn't a local plan, although it supports the local plan, and some of the policies within it are material consideration, and it isn't a detailed business plan. So what the partnership produce annually is a work programme and a budget, and we also have corollary marketing, income and other sort of strategies which have got more of the detail in. The documents already, given the nature and extent of our site and the breadth of the remit that the partnership have to cover, it's already an enormous document, and to try and factor in that level of detail would just make it unwieldy and unusable. So those are sort of, if you like, documents that nestle within and underneath it. There are multiple links with other national and regional strategies, given the breadth of that remit, and that diagram there just tries to identify some of them. So obviously we liaise very closely with organisations like Historic England and DCLG over issues to do with protection, with Natural England and DEFRA and the National Trust with issues to do with conservation, as well as DCMS, who are kind of like the parent organisation within government. When it comes to public-facing activities, presentation and transmission means that we take account of what Visit Britain are looking to do with regard to tourism, but also the Arts Council, business and industry with regard to the UK industrial strategy, and also national museums and other organisations like the British Geological Survey. So there's a lot of close working with a whole range of bodies, both at local level, but also transferring up to national strategy. During the last management plan that was originally adopted in 2013 and ran through until 2018, there were a number of significant improvements in the conservation and management of the site, 15 individual conservation projects, a series of cultural events over that period that reached ultimately about 180,000 people, just over 10 million invested in heritage-led regeneration and conservation, and about 9,000 pupils that received education projects and programmes related specifically to mining heritage in the area. The current management plan was developed following a evidence gathering exercise that commenced in 2017 and the formation of a steering group that looked closely at that evidence base. We did some formative consultation with the partnership group members and with officers from our partner organisations, and reached some initial conclusions which were then shared with a wider group of officers that are called the technical panel, and with the partnership itself, and those proposals were tested and then revised. But a pivotal moment for us came in 2019 when all of our partner authorities declared climate emergency. And the partnership chose to take that as an opportunity to, in effect, almost go back to the first base and revisit our proposals and indeed compare them and the wider remit for the World Heritage Convention in the context of climate emergency, and at the same time looked at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which actually marry up quite well with the World Heritage Site Management Plan, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. And also in 2019, a sustainability appraisal was commenced. And as a result of that exercise, the partnership identified that it probably needed to adopt 2 further policies and some additional strategic actions if it was going to really engage with the climate emergency agenda and engage more fully with the Sustainable Development Goals. So last year, early last year, a first draft for consultation based on those sustainability appraisal conclusions was prepared. And then, of course, we had lockdown. So that knocked us back a couple of months, but we still managed to commence a public consultation exercise just a couple of months later than we'd originally hoped, which started in July 2020. And on the basis of that, the findings from that, the final draft, which you have been circulated, was prepared. Just coming back to the first principles, if you like, the vision for the World Heritage Site. This was adopted at Inscription in 2006, and basically it focuses on using the status to reinforce cultural distinctiveness, helping to drive economic regeneration, and do so in a socially inclusive way. Obviously, with the Sustainable Development Goals being adopted by the UN in 2015, that gave us an opportunity to revisit and test those. And it was noted that they sit very well alongside, the UN SDGs sit really well alongside the existing vision, and offers us an opportunity to sort of articulate our value in that wider sustainable development context. In doing that, our partnership decided that whilst we retain the original vision and missions, because they are consistent, the current plan will seek to just emphasise more certain issues of social equity, climate resilience, and utilising more effectively our status to build international partnerships to help us address those too. And that's where the new policies and strategic action areas for planning, health and well-being, and environmental growth and climate action fit in. So, social equity, how are we going to do that, and how does that? So those 3, 7 and 8 they're the UN SDG goals, which we integrate with under that heading. And how does that fit with us? Well, as I mentioned, we covered 57 largely post-industrial towns and villages across Cornwall and West Devon. And when you map those with the areas of multiple deprivation, you can see that there's a strong correlation between the 10 World Heritage Site areas and areas where most deprivation is experienced. So on that map, I apologise if it doesn't reproduce great on a laptop size screen, but you can see that it's largely the darker brown colours where the blue areas overlap with. And our intention is that our activities and programmes should be designed in partnership with social agencies to seek to reduce barriers to participation wherever possible. So by focusing our activity, although we're not exclusively tied to those areas, we do tend to focus initially at least on those areas and make our offer, if you like, available there first and foremost. But just having an offer isn't always sufficient to make sure there's an uptake. So in future, what we'd like to do is work much more closely with social agencies to understand better what the barriers to participation are and to seek to try and remove those where we can, where it's within our gift. And also on that front, one of our aspirations would be to work again with organisations like health and wellbeing boards to try and make sure that we can co-design projects because we recognise that we aren't the fount of all knowledge, and there are a lot of people out there who know far more about these sorts of activities than we do, and it's their expertise we need to draw on. So the new management plan includes strategic actions on increasing volunteering opportunities, both to widen the diversity of partners involved and to get more people involved in actually caring for the landscape. And that itself has health and well-being benefits. We will also continue to do education projects and to build on our previous track record in sustainable tourism. And by that we mean tourism that is led by the communities, designed, if you like, by communities, and seeks to ensure that tourism contributes to their well-being and to the local economy, rather than just drawing down on it. And another activity area that we'll be looking to develop more over the next few years is using our channels of communication and our activity programs through cultural events and education to start to talk about climate change, how that impacts on the landscape and our lives, and how we need to address that, and what changes we can make in our lifestyles to do that. In terms of climate resilience, there's a whole range of different UN SDG targets with which the management plan goals will intersect. That's important, obviously, because Cornwall and Devon are very much in the front line. We've seen over recent years increasing number and severity of heavy weather, storm events, deluges, etc. And that has a real and an obvious effect on our landscape and our infrastructure. So we have to address this. Also, if you look at future projections, if we don't do anything in terms of changing the way we live and reducing carbon emissions, then that map is what's been predicted as our future in the year 2100. So the brown areas on that map will be largely uninhabitable. So only the green areas will be, in effect, food producing and habitable zones. And you can imagine the pressure that will put on humanity, and it's just unthinkable that we don't do anything. So there's an absolute imperative, but there's also currently an increasing number of legal and societal imperatives as well, and keeping an eye on what goes on out there in the wider world. You know, there's more and more now environmental law firms that are starting to mount challenges to central and local governments in terms of making sure that they exercise their obligations in regard to climate change. How does that fit with us? You might think, oh, well, it's an industrial landscape. And yes, we recognise that, in effect, the Industrial Revolution that our landscape is a legacy of, it was the progenitor of the very climate change challenges that we face. But we can also be part of the solutions. So it's a landscape with multiple ecological and environmental aspects and assets to it. And all of those can be deployed to reduce carbon emissions and address climate change. So just as an example there on that slide, within the 10 areas of the World Heritage Site, there are 38 sites of special scientific interest or geological significance. We have historic mine sites, some of which have unique, what we call metallophyte, and that's metal tolerant plant species. The minor small holdings and field hedgerows support flood resilience and are a sort of habitat for and biodiversity asset. Obviously, within the extensive underground mine workings, there's a great potential for geothermal energy, which I know you'll have looked at in detail. And of course, there is the potential for the resumption of mining for the minerals that will support low carbon technologies. So all of those things are issues that we've addressed in the management plan that we're bringing forward. The categories of intervention that we seek to engage with fit very much with the Cornwall Council Carbon Reduction Plan. So we're proposing activity that will meet the ecological, the technological and the social interventions. And in terms of how that fits within our management plan, that's where our two new policy proposals come in. A policy overtly supporting renewables, providing that these don't harm the outstanding universal value or its authenticity, and that sits alongside, in terms of its scope and the wording, it's very similar to the existing policy that we've always had on the resumption of mining, and also a new policy where we seek in effect biodiversity net gain wherever possible. from any applications or developments within the World Heritage Site. And that sits very well, I know, alongside the ideas that are coming forward from the Cornwall Council team that's working on the climate DPD. In terms of strategic actions, what those might look like, we are proposing, in effect, a programme of environmental research. So whilst we've got 38 SSSI stroke geological sites that, in terms of how they were designated, we'll know quite a bit about. Outside of those, there's a substantial landscape that we know will have ecological value. We just don't fully understand yet what that is, and we want to address that knowledge gap. We also want to develop climate measures to support resilience, particularly in those areas that are vulnerable to climate change in the site, and also we've said quite a lot more in this management plan about why we support the sustainable extraction of those minerals that are needed for low carbon technology. Our original policy on the sort of resumption of mining looks very much at this as a continuation of the cultural tradition. So it was a philosophical stance, if you like, that this landscape was formed by thousands of people over hundreds of years who engaged in mining as a way of life, and the designation should not sterilise that cultural tradition, if you like. But even more so now, looking at through the lens of this plan, what we're saying is that very cultural tradition and what we still have beneath our feet in Cornwall and Devon could actually be part of the solution to the legacy of climate change that's left us with. And it's our in our view, the partnership's view, it's a moral, if you like, responsibility to sort of engage with that. And where do international partnerships fit in all of this? SDG 11.4 itself requires the UK government and local authorities to strengthen how they protect and safeguard the World Heritage Sites in their care. And there's a specific indicator to measure investment in that. So the UK government and local authorities will be assessed against it anyway. And our activity in that field can actually help develop part of the monitoring information and evidence base that will be needed for that. And also beyond that, SDG 17 includes a requirement to enhance global partnerships for sharing knowledge about sustainable development, and the World Heritage Site provides Cornwall and Devon authorities with existing membership, if you like, of a global club that we can just directly tap into if we want to build those sorts of partnerships. So just to very briefly summarise, the final draft of the plan that was circulated to you contributes to several of the Cornwall Council's strategic priorities. You've got the environmental growth strategy, the local plan, the mineral safeguarding DPD, the climate programmes, Gatling Warbath, and the emerging climate DPD. We plug into, if you like, as part of that strategic context, all of those documents. And our recommendation, therefore, is that you, as an Overview and Scrutiny Committee, recommend to the Leader of the Council that you endorse this plan and that the Cornwall Council should adopt it. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you very much indeed, not just for pulling that together, but for the unremitting enthusiasm you showed during the presentation. Impressive. You've highlighted the recommendation, which is great. Members have seen this, so I would hope that we would be looking at sort of one or two points of clarification rather than anything else. But I don't want to listen to lengthy speeches about it, if that's okay. So my first speaker on this is Councillor Olivier, followed by Councillor Mike Thomas, followed by Councillor Bert Biscoe.
Yeah,
Councillor Olivier.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to propose the recommendation, though not wishing to cut short anything else anybody wants to say. Okay. I do have a couple of passing questions for Deborah. In my first time on the council, I was a member of the World Heritage Site Steering Group. You know, one of the most interesting things you can be involved is as a councillor, and you know, such a key part of Cornwall's identity. So very, very precious. My questions arising from that, also it's a great pleasure to read a document and recommend a document that doesn't contain, as far as I can see, a single reference to parking. That gives me a satisfaction. But on the subject, previously I've had discussions, not recently, but previously with Deborah about the planning system and the relationship between the World Heritage Site and Cornwall's planning, Cornwall as a planning authority. I mean, are you happy with that relationship as it stands at the moment, Deborah? Could it still be improved? Are there areas of concern? Is the main question I will ask, and I've got a specific question which I'll actually leave about one site, Geevil, which I'll perhaps leave till after the meeting and contact you offline. But how is the relationship between the World Heritage Site and the planning system nowadays?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Olivier. Speaking as somebody who's been married for 30 years, I would say that any relationship could always stand improvement and needs to be worked out. However, I would say that we are in regular contact with our, not just Cornwall Council, obviously, there are two other local planning authorities that are represented, if you like, on the partnership board. I think the key thing is that at that strategy level and policy level, there is a clear relationship that's set down, starts with the National Planning Policy Framework, which gives clear instructions, if you like, and guidance on how World Heritage Sites are to be regarded in decision making and determination. And the local plan has got a very strong policy in there, Local Plan Policy 24, which gives a very clear indication of the primacy of the World Heritage Site as a heritage asset of the greatest significance. So structurally, if you like, we've got everything we need there. The challenges are always to do with the interpretation of policy. And we constantly work on that with our colleagues in the planning department. So we have provided specialist training both for members and officers, and that's very much an ongoing process. And I would say that looking at the stats, just dragging this out the back of my memory, in recent years, looking at decision-making processes that, in relation to the World Heritage Site in Cornwall, about 9 out of 10 planning applications that go through in Cornwall are determined in line with our view, if you like. So we are a consultee, not a statutory consultee, but we have an officer who gives specialist advice to the planning authority. And 9 times out of 10, the decisions are made in line with that. So we're working on the 1 in 10 where maybe there's a bit more of a need for further work on how we interpret that policy and how we both mutually understand it. But I will say it's improved greatly in recent years by virtue of bringing us in at the earliest possible stages. We strongly advocate being engaged at the pre-application stage, particularly on major developments, because that way we save everybody time and energy, which usually equates into money for the developer as well.
Deborah, thank you. Councillor Olivier, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Councillor Mike Thomas.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Deborah, for your presentation. I shall be fully supporting this item. I've got a quick observation and then a question. I missed the consultation period. I think we got the email around about the 8th of August, and I was too busy involved in eating out to help out, and going through that sort of phase to actually get it involved. As you may recall from our email conversation back in 2017, I am particularly concerned about the areas that aren't designated within the World Heritage Sites, particularly Kerrier South, the district of Kerrier South. And my question really is expansion or considering going into other areas still as complicated as you explained back to me in 2017? Is it not possible for us to do something perhaps unofficially to recognise these areas omitted in 2006? Helston, as you know, has a mining valley, streams, streaming tin, 20 or so wheels, and was home to one of the 5 coinage halls and all that. And also with the Grills Memorial in the centre of the town, to have that as part of the whole connectivity to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, I think many people would really welcome that. So really, is there a way of, and that's what I would be submitting, of actually trying to expand unofficially the sites so we recognise areas of Cornwall, which South Kerry is only but one. I realise there are other parts of Cornwall that haven't got in, as I suspect that's what was suggested by Councillor Broy a few moments ago from the Bude area. So really, it's really taking into consideration those areas that do consider themselves having a long history of association with mining that don't seem to get a look in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Unfortunately, the situation is as described in 2017. So there are clear criteria that are set by UNESCO for inclusion in the World Heritage Site. And on the basis of the advice we were given by UNESCO's professional advisory bodies back in 2005, well, 4-5, before we were inscribed in 2006, we could only include the areas that are now defined because they were regarded as the only ones that met those criteria. However, yes, you're absolutely right that mining across Cornwall and West Devon was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. There are huge tracts of land, as you quite rightly say, where mining was, certainly in our period of interest, the principal form of employment and the biggest economic driver. What I would say is we've had this conversation with other areas before, that I and the team would very much like to understand what you would like to achieve, what your objectives are, because given the breadth of the remit, I'm sure there are ways in which the projects that we deliver could still benefit or be offered to people and communities outside of the immediate boundaries. We've always done that with our cultural event programme, for example, and with our education programme. So, and I know there'll be schools that we've engaged with, for example, in the Helston area as a result of activity in the last couple of years. So I think there are ways that those communities can still benefit from those 10 areas having that status without actually being in the site themselves.
Yes, if I may just briefly come back, Chair. On the page that deals with our nearest area, for example, Wendron, it just seems to end there. There's no sort of connectivity to all the stuff that goes on further south. And I just wonder if there could be some hyperlinks to give people some chance of seeing what else went on. And I'd be happy to link with you and share. I'm not the expert, I just happen to know the experts in the area who feel very strong about it. And I'd be happy to get in touch with them, to get in touch with you. Thank you ever so much.
Deborah, is that something you'd be willing to take up?
Indeed, Chair, yes. And basically, we've got a new website that was launched literally just before Christmas, which gives us a great deal more flexibility to link and to very swiftly update and add additional information. So if Councillor Thomas would be so kind as to point me in the right direction, we'd be very happy to sort of make those contacts and build those links into that website. Thank
you ever so much, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Mike. Councillor Biscoe.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. As myself and Martin Eddy are probably the only two people still active who participated in the original meeting that decided to go for a World Heritage Site in the first place, I think I can safely say that nobody had the first idea when we actually decided to do that, or in the lengthy process of developing it, that it would develop with such drive and intelligence as we are seeing witnessed both in the presentation and in this management plan. And I think that is due in no small part, Chairman, to the leadership which has been given to the World Heritage Site by Deborah Bowden, and I pay tribute to that. I think it's an incredible contribution to Cornish life worldwide. And I would celebrate it, and I hope members would join me in doing so. I fully support the inclusion of the two new policies, C5 and C7. I think they're very sensible, and I very much support the response that the World Heritage Site is developing to the potential for the exploitation of new minerals, especially where they contribute to a carbon-free society. And lastly, I would just like to say I'm very supportive of the policies in the section named transmission in supporting development of relationships with other parts of the Cornish mining heritage around the world, with the long-term view of aligning them with our ascription as a World Heritage Site. And I would very much like to ask Deborah if she would be able to outline to us how those projects and relationships are developing as years go by. From time to time we see evidence of them, the Pasty Festival in Redruth being one of them, but it's a cultural relationship with those places, but also potentially a technical relationship which can only enhance both ourselves and everywhere else. And as we look after Brexit at how we establish and sustain ourselves in a much broader economic picture in the world economy, I think that the Cornish World Mining Heritage Site is becoming of increasing value as we go along. And I think the intelligence with which it is being aligned with the United Nations objectives and with which it is being managed is a testament to the team, but also to the council, that despite the troubles and tribulations that it faces, has stuck resolutely to the principle that it will support it and take it forward in a positive and constructive way. And all power to Kerno's elbow.
Councillor Biscoe, thank you, very well put. And I'm certain if you were to second the recommendation shortly that Councillor Olivier has proposed and request that thanks to Deborah be included in it, I'm certain that committee will be supportive of that. Because
I'm sure I'd be happy to accede to that request, Chairman.
Yeah, I have to say this is a very lengthy and complex report, and it's received unremittingly positive comments and questioning, which in my experience on this committee is not usual. So that in itself, I think, is tribute to the work that Deborah and others have done. So thank you. I don't have any other members wishing to speak. That I think, Deborah, is testament to the work.
Is Deborah going to comment on international relations? That was my question.
Excellent. Have you defined international, Councillor Biscoe? Are you talking about England, or are you talking about beyond the shores?
I am talking about England as well as the rest of the world, Chairman, naturally.
I suspected you might be. Deborah?
I'd be very happy to comment on that, but first of all to thank Bert for his very kind and generous words. Yes, we are indeed working on multiple levels actually in terms of international relations, and I will include England in that. We and the other home countries, because of course there are strong links with both Wales and Scotland, and indeed Ireland, not just Northern Ireland. It's amazing just how prolific and energetic the Cornish were in terms of sharing their knowledge, expertise, and their desire to sort of go around the world exploring new potential mining areas. So in terms of what we're doing on an informal level, particularly driven by the new website and our new membership scheme, which if you haven't already seen, might I encourage as many of you who are interested in this to maybe sign up for as possible. It's a very modest £24 a year, and that gives you access to a whole range of additional information and newsletters. And what we're doing with that membership scheme is we're making a very ambitious offer to all of the Cornish diaspora communities that we have contacts with to link with us through that. And we've produced some lovely material. If you haven't had a chance to already, go to the new website and dig that out, if you pardon the pun. There's some amazing stories that are being shared with us by people around the world who are so proud of their Cornish roots. So on that very informal level, we're doing some work there. On a more formal level, we are regularly consulted by other mining landscapes that are either already a World Heritage Site or have aspirations to become one, and we're being seen, if you like, as a reservoir of knowledge and experience on that. One of the things we'd like to do as the next few years rolls forward is see if there's a way that we can monetize that. We don't want to put people off talking to us, but we also recognize that we may need to put a value or a price on some of our expertise, and then taking that to the next level. Finally, what we originally envisaged in the last plan, and we've carried forward as an aspiration in this one, is a longer term goal to actually look at extending our outstanding universal value by adding into the Cornish Mining World Heritage Site, those places around the world where the landscape survives to the same quality and density as we have it here. So first on that list would be South Australia, where the areas Moonta and Burra, we know right from community through to their South Australian state, share an aspiration to pursue that status. We're also in discussion at the moment with Victoria, Ballarat and Bendigo, and a number of other areas are looking to try and achieve World Heritage Site status for their gold mining areas, and there are links there back to us. It's not necessarily as intense as the links with South Australia, but they are regularly consulting us on how we became a World Heritage Site and how you manage a multiple area landscape, and that's just two. And we also have a number of other countries like Mexico and Southern Ireland that are also potentially interested in pursuing World Heritage status. So it's a larger and growing part of our work, actually, Bert, and that's something that we've, as a team, been very encouraged by, and the partnerships are very supportive. And as you know, Julian German as chairman of that partnership, particularly so. Okay,
Deborah, thank you, and Bert, thank you for raising that. That sounds yet again very encouraging. So, Councillor Olivier has proposed the recommendation. Councillor Biscoe, in seconding, do you wish to add something in relation to an expression of thanks?
Well, I would like to offer the thanks, or record the thanks of the committee to Deborah Bowden and her team for the leadership and guidance and dedication that they show to the very positive and important tasks that they undertake.
Okay, I have a proposer and a seconder. I don't have any alternative propositions. So, Lynn, could I request that we move to the vote on this, please?
Yes, Chairman, if we can go straight to the vote. The recommendation is set out on page 85, and I will add in that thanks to Deborah and her team. So if I go straight to the vote, Councillor Biscoe.
4.
Councillor Brown.
4.
4.
Duffin. 4. Councillor Ellenbrook.
4.
Councillor Frost has left the meeting. Councillor LeBroy.
4.
Councillor McKenna.
4.
Councillor McLennan.
An excellent 4.
Thank you. Councillor Olivier.
4.
Councillor Harris.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
4.
Councillor Rushworth.
4.
Councillor Thomas.
4.
Thank you. That has been carried unanimously.
Lynn, thank you. Deborah and team, particular thanks. That was a fascinating presentation, fabulous enthusiasm, and actually based on hard evidence and achievement. So congratulations to all involved. I think it reflects very well on Cornwall, and it reflects very well on your efforts and that of your team. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. I'll pass that back to the team.
Please do. Thank you. Okay, that brings us now on to the final item on the agenda, because I haven't got any items of urgent business, and that is update and questions to Cabinet members. We've allocated half an hour to this. By way of points of reference, Councillor Hannaford, who can't be with us because she's recovering from an operation, I believe, she's provided a note in relation to gypsies and travellers on pages 304 to 306. She has indicated if members wish to drop her an email, she will ensure that your questions are responded to as quickly as she can. Councillor Mitchell, very succinct, page 307. Councillor Mitchell is present, so I'm certain we'll be delighted to answer questions, and I've got a queue of members already. Councillor Dwelly, a mere 25 pages from Councillor Dwelly, all his own work, and apparently there's more. Isn't a complete record, so feel free to ask questions. And Councillor Brown, 3 pages, 333 to 335. So we have 3 Cabinet members here to whom we can ask questions, but we won't be going on all afternoon because members can quite easily get in touch with quite easily get in touch with Cabinet members outside of the meeting. So Councillor Labroy first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And firstly, may I thank all of the portfolio holders that have given us such a grand report, particularly Councillor Dwelly, whose report I read with much interest. On page 132, this is a question for Councillor Dwelly. There's a reference to floating offshore wind and a reference to a bid being put together, I think, by the LEP to support a floating offshore wind project. My shadow of concern in my mind is that if we do get this this conceptualised, proved through, and big investment coming into a floating wind farm off the coast of Cornwall, that we actually do reap the benefits of servicing that industry. And I just want to seek some assurance, if it's at all possible, from Councillor Dwelly, that there would be parallel plans put down to make sure that we do reap the economic benefits of the opportunities to serve that new industry should it come forward.
Okay. Councillor Dwelly?
Yes, absolutely, Councillor LeBroy. That's entirely why we're doing this. I would just say one thing though, that off the shore of Cornwall, I think is perhaps sounds a bit like you see it from the beach, but we are talking about going out a fair way into the Irish Sea. And the benefits are that a combination of three of our main areas, Falmouth, possibly Newlyn and Hale, could all see employment of people either making devices that go out there or servicing them or doing survey work for them. There'll be a lot more to come on this when the Wave Hub sale, I hope, will be finalised, and I think a lot more detail will flow at that point. But it's very exciting because the scope for this is big, but we can't pretend we're the only country in the world interested, and I think there will have to be collaboration with other areas, particularly, funnily enough, Celtic nations who are our neighbours. But the parts of the sea we're talking about are UK waters. So the question is, what do we get to do from Cornwall? And I think the thing we're keen to do, I'm sure you'll agree, is to make sure we're a key part of that and not just half asleep as other parts of the UK or other countries go for it. Oh, and finally, the interest in this is now from very big companies indeed, who are even looking at Cornwall as a base for some of their activities. Thanks.
Councillor Dwelly, thank you. Councillor LeBroy, thank you very much for the question. Councillor Ellenbrook.
Thank you. This is a question for Councillor Dwelly. The SIL applications, I have a vested interest in this, I will confess, because my area has put an application in. Do you know when they're actually going to make the decisions? Because we were told December, but that hasn't happened.
Yes. Sorry, can you hear me okay? The decisions have been made, and I've just passed off the press release, which will release information, but I don't think it's okay for me to preempt any of that. But around £600,000 worth of funding to low carbon emphasis community infrastructure schemes has been approved. There was probably about £2.5 million worth of application for that, so there's a strong demand. But I'm absolutely delighted, and delighted also, I can say, that Louise Wood, Head of Service and I were happy to endorse the decisions of the panel, and it was good and and I have to say a little thing, I think generally for everyone on this committee, one of the best things about it is we got to ask questions of the people applying, and I think that's a lesson we could all learn in other areas like CLLD and other funds and town deals and the rest of it, is when you actually have a chance to ask someone applying for funds questions, you get a much better answer than having someone think they can represent them to you. So I'm taking that as a lesson for the future, and the amount of money coming into SIL is going up rapidly. So at some point next year, obviously after the election, there will no doubt be at least one or more calls. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rushworth, do you also have a question for Councillor Dwelly?
I do, thank you. Yes, it is for Councillor Dwelly. Can he guarantee that following the sale of the waiver, no more public money will be consumed by this project? And will he make a statement about the nature of the new owner?
No, of course I won't make a statement about the new owner. I don't know who it is yet, Stephen, and obviously that's all commercially confidential. What I am expecting is a sale to happen. We don't know to who yet or for how much. But I think it's almost the other way round. I'm going to tell you that we're going to be making money, and not only that, but we will be actually not having to spend the decommissioning costs to decommission this. So quite the opposite. I'm sure you'll welcome this along with me, that we're actually going to be saving money and making money and delivering high-powered jobs in the future, hopefully, as we move from wave to wind. There you go.
Councillor Dwelly, thank you. You have 2 thumbs up from Councillor Rushworth. Congratulations.
Amazing.
Right, next on my list is Councillor Cole.
I've got 2 things, Jim. The first one's for the record. The briefing note on the gypsies and travellers, I wish to register my extreme disappointment at its content. There's been issues raised about planning policy from members in the China Clay area for many years, and we've now in the process that the planning policy team is actually looking to review issues, and none of that stuff is covered at all in the report. So it's a bit of an oversight, to put it bluntly. So I just want that put on the record. And if Louise Wood and others are not still present, I'll be making that point outside the meeting. In terms of my question for Tim, obviously in the report you're referring to the latest government planning policy consultation, the one they call Supporting Housing Delivery and Public Sector Infrastructure. I've been liaising with officers, as you've invited people to. When I read it, I thought I was misreading it because it was so awful, and when I spoke to the officers, they concurred with my opinion. The fact that the government proposal to turn commercial and industrial properties into housing without the need for a formal planning application covers everywhere, and there's no size restrictions. So put bluntly, someone could turn a factory unit on Indian Queen's industrial estate into a residential development without any need for planning, no affordable housing, blah blah blah. Are we, I know we're going to put in a really strong response. I don't doubt that for 1 second, but I've already done it as a politician, but should the council be raising concerns publicly that this is another awful proposal that would be a disaster for Cornwall's planning system? Tim.
The answer is yes, I agree with you. Sorry, a noise went off in the background. Completely agree. If I'm honest, Dick, we're struggling to keep up with a plethora of changing advice on various matters to do with planning, but the national feedback to government on some of the previous proposals which this committee has discussed was pretty unanimous, and it led to the government effectively backing down both on housing numbers. So we're now back to our normal housing numbers in Cornwall, good, and it also led to them kicking into the long grass the horrendous proposal to change the affordable housing threshold to potentially 50 units. They haven't dropped it, but they said it's not something they're going to do by statute. So yes, of course, Cornwall will put in and play its part in being against what you're talking about. I agree with you. I share your concerns, but I think this is part of a national response. And I think what the government's trying to do is to encourage activity rapidly for growth, and I understand that, but it's the wrong way to do it. I think particularly of concern in Cornwall is out of town free for all of conversion. No, we don't want out of town shopping or factories turned into housing. I agree. I think there's a more nuanced opinion on in town, and it would, for me, would depend on the quality of what residential was happening in town centres, and that's something we're working on. But I don't get the feeling these changes are very solid or very sustainable. So we shall see. But I agree with you, and I will take this question as a prompt for me to ask the service to give me a feedback and copy in perhaps members of this committee on what we're going to do.
Councillor Dwelly, thank you. Councillor Cole, thank you for the question and also the observation which you'll take up with officers separately. Can I now invite Councillor Harris to ask a question, please? I can guess who this is for, but I'll leave you to say that.
Well, go on, you guess first then.
I'm going to guess Councillor Brown.
Well, no, you're wrong. Not for the first time, Jim. It's either Councillor Dwelly or Councillor Mitchell, I'm not sure. In the update on housing, Brookhouse Newquay, it says practical completion of the 28 new build flats was reached on Friday the 4th of December. How many of them have now been let? Very simple question. Councillor
Mitchell, I'm guessing. Councillor Councillor Mitchell, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Harris. The handover did happen in December, part of the council's commitment to supply and deliver 1,000 homes. When we did a visit halfway through the build, they looked like they were going to be fantastic. I know on the investment panel we did have some concerns about the lack of affordable homes that were being delivered on that site, but that was what planning had been granted. I'm not exactly sure how many have been let to date, but I will get an answer for you and circulate that.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Councillor Harris, thank you, and thank you for proving me wrong yet again. Councillor Malcolm Brown.
Yeah, I was going to ask Councillor Dwelly a question about the planning documents, and given that Councillor Cole has, I'm still going to ask a question, but I'm going to tweak it. Firstly, does he agree that we shouldn't be too complimentary to government for the way that they've changed the housing numbers in the latest algorithm? Because to me, that just demonstrates how the algorithm has no scientific validity whatsoever. It's just a response to political pressure. And secondly, I'm pleased that he was saying that the response to the current round of consultation is going to be robust. Can I suggest that officers, I think, are often reluctant or unable to be quite as graphic as we as politicians can be? Might he consider doing a forward again, a bit like he did on the response last year, so that he can put in the kind of language that I think most of us on this committee would identify with, rather than the more discreet language that I associate with officers.
Councillor Brown, thank you. Your first question is possibly the most closed I've ever heard on this committee, but Councillor Dwelly will relish responding to it, I'm sure. So, Councillor Dwelly.
Well, I'm sure there are certain councillors who don't want me to be further encouraged to kick the government, but I'm always happy to do so when they make horrible mistakes. But where they get something right, I'm also happy to say that. On this planning, I see no sign of that. I agree with you. It was literally an algorithm, a mutant algorithm, and that point was made, I think, by councillors of all political persuasions, notably the Conservative local authority members across the country. And you're right, it was withdrawn because it was damn stupid. But it has been withdrawn in favour of a concentration on certain northern cities, which may or may not actually produce the numbers for the housing that the government requires. But that's a national point. Yeah, happy to look at that. I think I need to get a complete refresh on where we're at with the latest guidance, particularly on this conversion of anything anywhere without planning permission. I hope, in fact, I think I'm going to say I believe that councillors from all parties and groups will probably be reluctant to back that proposal, and I think it would be very useful if our Conservative colleagues made their concerns, if they have them, I think they will, known to MPs as well as members of the administration. Thank you.
Councillor Dwelly, thank you. Councillor Ellenbrook, you have a question, I suspect, for Councillor Brown.
I do indeed, thank you. We have a serious situation, and I'm sorry to be parochial, in Redruth with an area of the town, Nettles Hill, approaching the car park, which needs double yellow lines, has been approved, but we are still waiting for them to come. How long are we going to have to wait for this to happen?
Councillor Brown.
Thank you for the question, Barbara. The simple answer is, off the top of my head, I don't know, but I will definitely find out and get back to you within the next 24 hours.
Thank you. It's actually Stephen Barnes's division, but obviously it's a Redruth issue, so that would be very much appreciated.
Okay. Councillor Brown, thank you. Councillor Ellenbrook, thank you for the question. Next on my list, I have Councillor McLennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon all. Regard to
what Tim just said, I think he would realise that the Conservative Party did have a lot of objections about the new planning proposals. So we had a separate meeting on that, and we use our common sense, and we don't follow. We don't follow like other people like sheep.
Can I just say, Jeff? Oh, he's muted himself. Thank
you, Councillor Mitchell. Good to know you're still with us.
I'll just stop from him and then, Chair.
No, fire away, Mike. Jeff's muted his phone and Councillor Mitchell's made his contribution, so you're good to go.
When we're talking about all the properties, I've actually never been out of my division for ages, but yesterday I had to take an urgent letter to solicitors in Newquay and to see all the houses being built, etc., etc., etc. How do we know how near we are to what we're supposed to be providing? I mean, is there a running total somewhere that says, yes, we're 5,000 short or we're 3,000 short? Because we're moaning about what the government wanted to do, which I disagreed with, but we don't seem to stop putting up properties ourselves. And I just wondered how near we are to the figures. And secondly, I feel quite strongly still listening today, and Tim always says to me, Mike, you've got to put in for things, try and get a fair share. I just feel that we still get really neglected in the clay country about the way forward. Someone answered me something about, oh, you got car clays, but I should imagine those, the people in the clay country won't get a chance there because they don't want to probably move away from their areas. And the last point, I'd like some clarification outside the meeting about the comment we had this morning about 18,000 people going to Truro. That's why we need to look at this pie door and building. But 18,000 people coming into Truro to do their jobs, they're probably, some of them, as Bert Biscoe said, probably happy living where they are. So you can't make all these assumptions. And, I sit and try and take everything in, but we have a lot of cross views are coming across out of all the meetings. Thank you.
Councillor McLennan, thank you. I mean, ordinarily Louise Wood, I suspect, would tell you where we are in terms of target, but I don't know, Tim, if you have that information to hand, but if not, you could follow it up. But you want to respond to the other points as well, please?
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to. Thank you, Mike. I mean, this is rough figures, but we can get you the absolute figures. But we were running at, I believe, just over 3,000 homes a year, which is a tiny bit as an annual rate recently, which is just over the target we've got. I can get you the perfect figures later, and any planners listening, please pass those on to Louise. We'll get them to you. The point being that government requires us to deliver a certain number of homes per year, crudely for 3,000, and we do that and we perform and we get that done, and we go over that number just slightly. But basically, the message is we're on track to do exactly what we have to do in the local plan. And a lot of the tensions that were around before we had the local plan agreed, I think have receded, because people now know it won't be way more and it won't be less than we need to meet housing needs. So I'm content with this. Obviously, COVID affects it, but all in all, it's on track. Car clays, well, I think a lot of areas would like the level of investment Car Clays offers, and what used to be Eco Town, etc. All I can say, Mike, and I've said this to you before, is it's a substantial investment, and it's proof that things are being planned for your area. And I don't necessarily accept that will be of no interest to local people, because I think what we've seen in the past is people, when new properties are built in an area where they live and their area of Cornwall, they're often the first people to want to buy them or rent them. So I think it's good news what's coming down the track, and I don't buy the idea that somehow the area is being completely forgotten in all respects. It's evidence that isn't the case. Now, you mentioned people going to work in Truro who may not want to live there, etc., etc. But I'm getting an interesting. You're saying you're hearing different messages. So am I right here that we're saying there are some people saying that we shouldn't be building too many homes in Truro because people might want to work from home and all this rather than live in Truro? I mean, there will be fewer people commuting into Truro, definitely, as a result of COVID and other pressures in the economy. we will see Cornwall Council and other employers will inevitably do like we're all doing, but you know, it'll be a hybrid, won't it? We won't be going in every day. We will be going in sometimes, and I think most organisations with lots of employees will see that, and that in itself will reduce some of the parking pressures. But if you have people living in a town, they're going to be potentially on foot, going to spend money in shops and in services locally. And I don't want to go back too much over, say, PIDAR, but for me it's fantastic that it's actually there in the city, in the town. Whereas in the past, I fear Cornwall has often looked to invest in places that are relatively remote. Even some of our smaller but very good schemes like Tolbaden, that is not a town centre development. So I don't doubt for a moment that it would be useful to have more people living in Truro, because it will keep Truro vibrant.
But you have to, sorry, Chair, can I come back?
Briefly, Councillor Fleming, yes, I've got other people wanting to speak as well.
I hear what you say, Tim. I don't, totally disagree. But if the work is so changing, and since I've been in Cornwall, since I've been in the council, we've heard about salaries not being paid the money that's around. They're not well-paid jobs in Cornwall. I don't know how you break that down into percentages. So open market houses, normally, if someone's coming to a bit of money or they've improved their jobs and they can move up the ladder, so that makes property available down the ladder,
yeah,
perhaps at a lesser price. But with the way employment is, and with the jobs, we've had all members briefing on jobs, etc. Tim.
Yeah.
Okay, you're quite close. You've got a business on giving business hubs out there and all that sort of thing. But I can't see where, if you compare city prices, so Truro's going to be a city place with new properties, how they can afford the open market prices unless they're really doing well in Cornwall or they're going to come from elsewhere. The rents in cities aren't cheap. You know, I would love to live in London when I worked in London, but I couldn't afford it, so I used to drive in every day. So I just don't see that, Tim. I don't see how we can work out what we can sell out, what we think we're going to bring in, and who's going to be buying them when there's all these properties going up all over the country at the moment.
Okay. So,
thank you. I think that the focus needs to be on the briefing provided by the cabinet members. Tim, is that something you can respond to?
Well, just very quickly. I think all of us on this committee would like to see people earn more in Cornwall, wouldn't we? And this council has pioneered the real living wage, and I've been delighted to be part of that. And we've also taken a vote unanimously to encourage employers to pay more than the real living wage. I think the reality is market homes across Cornwall are lived in by people who pay for them, whether they're rented or owned. Obviously, some people are better off than others, but quite a few people have homes which they're paying for at a lower level than they would be if they bought them new without a mortgage. You know, they own the equity in the properties, and there is, as you rightly say, a ladder, and people go up it or come down it. What I want to quickly quash, and I'm sure Andrew Mitchell would say the same, is this myth that new homes are overwhelmingly bought by people who don't come from Cornwall. That is simply the opposite of the fact. People who move to Cornwall who aren't from Cornwall will often frequently go for older existing properties. New properties in Cornwall, whether they are market or affordable, are overwhelmingly taken by people from Cornwall.
Tim, thank you. Mike, thank you for your questions. Councillor Rushworth.
Thank you very much. Before I ask, my question is for Councillor Mitchell. Before I say that, I'd just like to say that it's really good that local people are being able to buy all these new houses, which is being predominantly driven by the Help to Buy scheme that the government introduces. So my question for Councillor Mitchell is, as Andrew knows, I think he's done a great job in promoting housing, and especially affordable housing in Cornwall. And it's really good that the last this administration has virtually matched the same delivery numbers of about 300 houses for affordable housing yearly delivery in Cornwall. But is he aware that Paul Crawford, the chief executive of Live West, in their annual return has issued the following statement that they built nearly 600 affordable homes in Devon last year as part of their plans, and as part of their plans to spend 2 billion in the economy over the next 6 years, they intend to increase that number. So are we talking to Live West and trying to get them to come down here and deliver the same as they are in Devon? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rushworth, and for your kind words. So I wasn't aware of the exact statement by their chief executive. It was over a year ago now when I actually did meet with a number of directors of Live West at their new headquarters for Cornwall down in Tolvadden, and I was surprised to hear of their programme that they had over £1 billion, and when Cornwall Council steps up to that playing field, and my certainly hope and view and trajectory is that we do. I wish Cornwall to be the #1 authority in delivering not only affordable homes, which we've held for the last 2 years as #1. So it actually does go to show that our commitment to that and intervention in the housing market has kept Cornwall as #1, as every other authority has slipped. And we can discuss percentages and numbers, but I certainly want to keep those up. But we not only just Live West, but also Coastline and Ocean, Westwood, and all the other housing associations operating in here in Cornwall. We have a great relation. Well, I think we do from our side, and I hope that they do from their side. Believe we have a great working relationship, and we also have a fund which supports their programme, and including Live West Properties and their delivery here in Cornwall. And if I could just go back to what Councillor Cole said, because obviously there is a planning consultation at the moment, but it does seem that everybody except the government can see the flaws in what they're proposing in these sort of non-planning requirements to just convert office buildings and industrial units to housing. All the housing organisations or architects, we're all really concerned that they will be, and I don't use this word lightly, they will be the slums of the future. And we really must, not just for planning issues and involving communities into what is happening in their local area, but also just as human beings in how other human beings are, unfortunately, could be well forced to live. They will be substandard, and we must point out, and hopefully the government will take on board. They did over certain other things where all politicians said this isn't right, and they have thought about it and looked at it. But I am amazed we do have to keep sticking the pin into the government and saying, are you really suggesting this? Not just from planning, but also from housing and how families live, we need to object to those points. I just wanted to add that to Dick, but and I look forward to the new council. Whoever is there, really take up the cudgel and make sure that the council's emphasis goes away from affordable homes, away from the housing development programme. We'll let Treveth get on with the delivery of that, which is a huge change in the market anyway. And we concentrate on delivering social housing. That's what I want to see across the whole of Cornwall.
Councillor Mitchell, thank you.
Just come back and say, Andrew knows that I concur with him on those points. And I will say that the government have to look at all their policies for the whole of England, but be rest assured, we in Cornwall have put great pressure on to give them kind of some halfway house and negotiating with them when it comes to their final decision. So we are working on the same way, I assure you that. But don't forget that they're looking to build houses everywhere else in England. They can't just do a policy for every area. So, but we do our best to bring it down to what's right for Cornwall. Thank you very much. Oh, and Andrew, I can send you the information.
And I think Councillor Dwelly reflected that in one of his earlier comments, that he thought it was all groups that were actually doing that. So, okay, I've got a couple of members, and then I'm going to close this off. I've got Councillor Cole, no doubt wanting to conclude issues on Clark-Clays. And then I've got the Vice Chairman, who will ask the final question or make the final comment. Councillor Cole.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Rushworth, who just said the government's doing planning policies for England, it'd be nice if we could do the planning policies for Cornwall, and we couldn't do a worse job, to be blunt. And just from what Councillor Mitchell said about the planning consultation, just one other small point. My parish has done a neighbourhood plan which protects employment land in various locations. So if the changes were to go through, a quarter of our neighbourhood plan, which hasn't yet gone to referendum because of COVID, would actually be ripped up and would be irrelevant after 4 years' work. I think that sums up the ridiculousness of the situation, and I hope others will look at what's happening in their local plans. But obviously, Tim's upset me by talking about West Clark-Clays. You really shouldn't do that, Tim, and I will put in a formal request to you to actually do some sort of review of the amount of time that goes into supporting such initiatives and what levels of support goes into existing communities. Because, you know, you've got various officers doing stacks of stuff on the eco-town in our neck of the woods, and yet we're struggling to get support when we're trying to get facilities in the existing communities. And I think we'll disagree about the eco-town anyway, but I think there is an issue as to how you do the existing. If I give you one example, and I think if you've been there, you'd have probably agreed. We were invited, the 6 members of Clay Country, a presentation about officers linking into some health initiative about getting new, better health facilities into Clay Country. But they were talking about these new facilities going into the eco-town, which hasn't been built, has absolutely no people in it, and it was the priority for health, when the existing communities have got lots of shortfalls, and a network area of 28,000 people, for example, does not have one single dentist, private or NHS. And that kind of imbalance to us was massive. And that, so some of our criticism does relate to the imbalance between council priorities, and I hope you will take that on board. Thank you.
So if you want to respond to that, could you do it succinctly, please?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say that I share, Dick, your view that existing property and communities matter, and I'm not one for only thinking about just 1 or 2 sites in Cornwall, and I hope I've proved that by backing initiatives to help towns across Cornwall with town centre vitality, and not just 1 or 2 of the places that tend to get that attention. And I don't particularly mean to be the member for Langarth only, by any means, for all sorts of reasons. So I take what you're saying. I'm happy to look again at all that, but I still think that garden villages are part of the mix. And however, as you rightly say, you can't put all your eggs in the one basket of the one big new shiny thing. And we are, I hope, increasingly looking to do more on, for example, if Edwina was around, she'd say, retrofitting better quality insulation, such like with existing properties, and that's a big issue around your way, I know. So anyway, basically I agree with you more than you might expect, Dick.
Tim, thank you. Councillor Cole, thank you. And Councillor Duffin, the final question or comment, please.
On a very similar point to Councillor Cole, because of what Councillor Rushworth mentioned, I would just like confirmation from all our Cabinet members that they will continue to ask for devolution of our planning policies to Cornwall, seeing that the government can't possibly do planning for the whole of the country, and we would like control of our own planning and housing policies. To all of the Cabinet members still on.
Can I go first and say yes?
Councillor Mitchell?
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
Absolutely.
I think that's 3 out of 3 actually, because yes, I think that's 3 out of 3. So thank you. So that is confirmed. I'm sure committee, well, the majority of committee would echo that. That concludes the business today. Thank you very much. Can I thank members for participating. Can I thank officers for their support and their help, particularly with some of the IT, which is not the easiest thing, I have to say. And can I particularly thank those working behind the scenes who have done an excellent job in terms of keeping me on track and keeping the meeting on track. So thank you, everybody. Have a good day, and no doubt speak to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Bye. And thank you, Lynn.
Well done, Jim.
Thank you, Joyce.
And Leanne, thank you.
Yeah, well done, Jim. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.